What if history is not missing a page, but an entire chapter? One drowned by rising seas and buried under silt. A chapter of cities, temples, and stories the ocean has refused to return. Tonight, we follow a trail of stone and legend, from the turquoise shallows of the Caribbean to the stair-stepped cliffs off Japan, from India's storm-lashed coast to a high Andean lake where myths breathe as heavily as the thin mountain air. Some call it Atlantis, others dismiss it as illusion. But if even part of it is true, it changes everything we thought we knew about our past. You're watching Chronicle of Secrets, and this is not just a story. It's a riddle that demands our best science and our bravest imagination. Picture this. You're descending through blue silence, the beam of your light cutting across a wall of stone. It looks too straight, too precise, as if some forgotten architect once designed it. A few meters farther, the seafloor folds into steps, like a staircase that should have carried priests or kings, not fish. And then the question crashes in. Is this the work of nature, or the memory of a civilization the ocean erased? We know one unshakable truth. After the last ice age, the seas rose hundreds of feet, swallowing entire coastlines. Cities, temples, harbors, all the places where humanity first gathered, were drowned. That's not myth. That's science. And yet, when sonar draws a perfect right angle, when myths whisper of islands swallowed whole, when fragments of pottery appear where no city should exist, suddenly science feels like it's only telling half the story. This is where Atlantis returns, not just as Plato's allegory, but as the ultimate riddle. Was it a cautionary tale, a memory of disaster, or a real city that once ruled the seas before vanishing in a single night? Every submerged wall, every mysterious terrace, every diver's tale keeps the legend alive. In this journey, we'll do something rare. We'll honor the evidence, weigh the sober explanations of geology and archaeology, and still dare to walk into the wild forest of theories. Atlantis, lost civilizations, even whispers of visitors from beyond the stars. Because the ocean is the world's greatest archivist and its most deceptive storyteller. It hides everything, but shows us just enough to make us wonder what truths still lie waiting in the dark. Imagine standing on a coastline that no longer exists. 20,000 years ago, the Earth's face was unrecognizable. Ice sheets the size of continents pressed down on the north, and shorelines stretched hundreds of miles farther out. Where today we see nothing but open water, there were once fertile valleys, rivers, and the first settlements of humankind. People built shrines to their gods, villages for their families, and harbors for their boats, all in places that are now hidden far beneath the sea. Then the world began to change. The climate warmed, the glaciers melted. Slowly, relentlessly, the seas rose more than 300 feet. Not in a single catastrophic wave, but in a steady march across centuries. Each generation watched their land shrink, their temples drown, their dead swallowed by tides. What we call myth may have been their lived reality, a world literally vanishing beneath their feet. Storm after storm tore at the coasts. Rivers poured mud and silt into drowned valleys, burying streets and courtyards like confetti falling over forgotten festivals. Today, divers still glimpse walls offshore. Sonar paints outlines of avenues. Fishermen snag shards of pottery where no city should exist. And here's the crucial point. This is not the work of aliens, nor the stuff of fantasy. It is the inevitable consequence of sea level rise after the Ice Age. Ordinary families lost extraordinary worlds. But here lies the twist. Ordinary causes can leave behind sites that feel anything but ordinary. Geological fractures can mimic temples. Eroded cliffs can resemble staircases. The sober truth explains much, but it does not erase the mystery. Because when you stare at a stone staircase deep underwater, you are forced to wonder, was this nature's illusion, or the echo of a civilization the ocean erased? Imagine gliding through clear Bahamian water, when suddenly the seafloor turns into something no diver expects: a road. Massive blocks stretch in a line, flat-topped and fitted like the foundation of a vanished city. It doesn't look random. It looks deliberate, like a causeway leading into the past. This is the Bimini Road, perhaps the most debated formation in the Atlantic. Geologists argue it's natural, beach rock fractured by stress, then rearranged by storms. And yes, nature is capable of sharp edges and uncanny alignments. But if you hover above those stones, the illusion feels stubborn. Some slabs appear stacked, others seem wedged, as if hands, not waves, set them in place. If this is a trick, it is one of the finest tricks the ocean has ever played. Move south, and the mystery deepens. Off Cuba, sonar has traced vast geometric patterns, rows of blocks, even structures resembling pyramids, hundreds of feet below the surface. For a moment, headlines screamed of Atlantis rediscovered. Then the trail went cold. No follow-up expeditions, no peer-reviewed reports, only fragments of data, and a rumor that something extraordinary had been glimpsed, then swallowed again by silence. And then comes Bermuda, a name already drenched in legend. Pilots spoke of lights in the clouds before vanishing. Ships set out and never returned. Beneath those same waters, divers whisper of colossal shapes, sharp-edged pyramids rising from the seabed, massive stones aligned in eerie symmetry. Some dismiss them as tricks of light. Others insist they are structures. The debate has never truly ended. Science offers a sober anchor. Sea levels rose after the Ice Age, and natural processes can mimic architecture. Yet here's the paradox. If early coastal settlements really were drowned, this is exactly the kind of ghostly outline we should expect. Roads half buried, walls broken and scattered, the skeletons of towns distorted by time. That is why Bimini, Cuba, and Bermuda still grip our imagination. They are not just formations of stone. They are crossroads between skepticism and wonder. Are they nature's imitations? Or are they fragments of forgotten cities, the first hints of a world Atlantis may have been meant to describe? Imagine dropping through storm-tossed Pacific waters, your light cutting into the blue. Suddenly, the seafloor transforms, not into sand or coral, but into steps. A staircase, each riser clean and sharp, descends into darkness. Walls stretch in straight lines. Terraces unfold like courtyards. You are not looking at random geology. You are standing inside something that looks like a city. This is Yonaguni. Divers have traced avenues, platforms, even what resembles a step pyramid. To the eye, it feels designed. But skeptics argue otherwise. They insist it is nothing more than sandstone fractured by earthquakes, then polished by waves. Nature, given time, can mimic precision. It can chisel illusions. And yet, questions refuse to die. Some stones appear wedged together like masonry. Marks on surfaces look eerily like carvings. A few researchers have even identified shapes resembling animals and faces, details hard to dismiss as coincidence. If any of this is artificial, it would place builders in Japan more than 10,000 years ago, long before Egypt's pyramids, long before Mesopotamia. It would mean history is missing an entire chapter. Complicating it all is the location. Yonaguni lies in the Dragon's Triangle, Japan's own Pacific Bermuda. For centuries, fishermen told stories of glowing spheres rising from the waves, of ships disappearing without a trace. Modern pilots reported compasses spinning and instruments failing. It is a region where myth, mystery, and fear converge. So what do we see at Yonaguni? Is it the ocean's greatest sculptural trick, or the drowned remains of a civilization we barely admit could exist? One answer is safe. The other is shattering. And that's why Yonaguni endures. Because every time a diver descends those steps, they are forced to choose. Are we witnessing geology's illusion, or humanity's forgotten masterpiece? For centuries, Dwarka was dismissed as myth, a golden city said to have been built by Lord Krishna, only to be swallowed by the sea. It was poetry, not history. Allegory, not archaeology. At least, that's what scholars believed, until the ocean began to whisper otherwise. In 2001, sonar scans in the Gulf of Kumbat revealed patterns no one expected. Grids of stone, avenues, and walls stretching across 5 square miles of seabed. Divers recovered pottery, beads, and tools. Radiocarbon tests suggested some artifacts were up to 9,000 years old. If that dating holds true, it would make Dwarka older than Mesopotamia, older than Egypt, an urban settlement from a time when humans were supposedly still hunters and gatherers. Conservative voices argue it was just an early coastal village, drowned when seas rose after the Ice Age. But the evidence refuses to stay simple. Stones appear cut and placed with intention. Streets run parallel like planned layouts. If this is coincidence, it is a staggering one. If it is not, then the Mahabharata and other epics may not be allegory at all, but memory, distorted through centuries of song, yet rooted in real cities that once stood on real shores. Consider the texts: tales of flying vimanas, weapons brighter than lightning, wars of gods fought in fire. Science calls them metaphor, but archaeology has a way of embarrassing certainty. When divers stand on what looks like temple foundations, where those very stories placed them, the line between myth and history grows perilously thin. Dwarka forces us to confront a dangerous possibility: that human civilization is older, more complex, and more cyclical than we have allowed ourselves to believe. Myths may not be inventions, they may be archives. And if one lost city of legend is real, how many others still sleep beneath the waves, waiting for us to rediscover what our ancestors tried to remember in story? At nearly 12,500 feet above sea level, Lake Titicaca should be too cold, too remote, too thin of air for legends to thrive. And yet, for the Inca and their ancestors, it was nothing less than the womb of creation. They said the sun sent his children from its waters to found civilization. They said gods walked its shores. For centuries, scholars called these myths. Then divers went beneath the waves. What they found wasn't myth, but stone. At depths of 30 to 40 meters, explorers mapped terraces, walls, a road vanishing into darkness, even the foundations of a temple. Gold figurines, pottery, carved stones, all pulled from the lake bed, dated to more than 1,500 years ago. The water had preserved what time should have erased, and suddenly, the story of a drowned city called Wanaku, whispered in local traditions, began to sound like history remembered in disguise. Geologists offer the cautious answer: shore settlements overwhelmed by rising waters and tectonic shifts. Logical, yes, but not enough. Some structures appear massive, deliberately cut, aligned like planned plazas. Local myths speak not of ordinary builders, but of giants. And when myths and stone ruins appear in the same place, logic begins to bend. Then come the accounts modern science avoids. Fishermen speak of glowing orbs rising from the lake at night. Pilgrims tell of lights beneath the surface, moving like stars beneath the water. Some describe shadows large enough to resemble ships, though no vessels cross those depths. These stories echo across centuries, ignored by textbooks, yet stubbornly alive among those who live by the lake. And so, Lake Titicaca stands at the crossroads of myth, memory, and mystery. If it is only a sacred lake, then the ruins below are remarkable enough. But if the legends hold truth, if Wanaku was real, if Viracocha, the creator god, was more than allegory, then Titicaca may be one of the last surviving windows into a forgotten world. The Andes call it holy. Standing at its edge as the sun drops and the sky burns red, you feel why. It is not just beauty. It is the sense that beneath those waters lies a chapter of human history deliberately sealed, perhaps by nature, perhaps by catastrophe, perhaps by something else entirely. When people picture myths, they imagine fairy tales, stories meant to entertain or to moralize. But if you listen closely, myths act more like time capsules. They compress generations of memory into symbols, into images durable enough to survive when parchment rots or cities sink. Think of a fisherman on the coast of India, centuries before Dwarka was rediscovered. He doesn't talk in terms of sea level rise or tectonic subsidence. He tells his children that the ocean swallowed the city of Krishna. An Inca elder by Lake Titicaca doesn't lecture on geology. He says the children of the sun came out of the water. The Greeks? They imagined an island of rings, rich and radiant, that angered the gods and fell beneath the sea. Strip away the poetry, and what remains is always the same. Something once stood where there is only water now. That is why Atlantis will not die. It isn't because Plato was persuasive or because conspiracy books keep selling. It's because the human brain is wired to keep stories when landscapes change. When shorelines vanish, memory builds a substitute coast made of words. And the strangest thing is, those words sometimes match what sonar finds today. Science urges caution. Myths exaggerate, embroider, collapse centuries into a single tale. But archaeology reminds us that legend often grows from a seed of fact. A temple really did drown at Dwarka. A staircase really does stand beneath Yonaguni's waves. And that tension between symbol and stone is exactly why the myth of Atlantis still commands attention. We're not just chasing Plato's island. We're asking whether humanity's oldest memories, whispered as myths, might be maps waiting for us to read them. By now, the ocean has given us a pattern. Blocks at Bimini, steps at Yonaguni, temples at Dwarka, plazas beneath Titicaca. They're not just anomalies, they're invitations. But how do we read them without being fooled by our own hunger? There are really two currents pulling us. The first is what we know. Seas rose by hundreds of feet since the Ice Age. Whole coastlines vanished. Humans have always clung to shores, so of course villages and harbors now lie offshore. Geology can carve convincing illusions, straight lines, terraces, blocks that look deliberate but aren't. And we have genuine sites, anchors, harbor walls, jetties. Messy, testable, real. The second is what we want. We want the grand revelation. Pyramids sleeping in the dark, a mother civilization erased in a single flood. Even teachers from the stars who lit the torch of architecture and astronomy. That longing is powerful. It's what keeps us searching sonar scans and silted ruins. But here's the danger. The line between knowledge and desire is thin, and the ocean thrives in that blur. Geometry whispers. Myths echo. One sonar ping looks like a boulevard. One story about a drowned city becomes the memory of Atlantis. Still, desire is not the enemy. It's the compass. The trick is calibration. You point it with curiosity, and you steady it with carbon dates and rock cores. That way, when myth and measurement finally converge, we'll know we've found something real. And maybe that is why Atlantis won't die. Not because Plato was clever, but because humanity needs a name for the lands we've lost, the harbors we've forgotten. The memories water keeps better than we do. Atlantis is less a place than a mirror. It reflects both what we know and what we long for. Stand there long enough, between science and myth, and you begin to wonder. If the two currents ever meet, what else might rise from the deep? Talk long enough about drowned cities, and the alien question always surfaces. Switch on a documentary late at night, and you'll hear it. Yonaguni wasn't geology, it was a runway. Dwarka wasn't a harbor, it was a starport. Atlantis wasn't human, it was a base. The idea is seductive because it feels like a shortcut. When blocks look too neat, when temples seem too early, when calendars align too perfectly, we imagine someone else must have handed us the answers. Visitors from the sky, teachers from the sea, architects not our own. But pause a moment. What do we lose when we default to that story? We strip away the brilliance of the hands that carved, stacked, and aligned those stones. We forget that our species crossed oceans in canoes, mapped stars without telescopes, and raised megaliths with ropes and vision alone. And yet, the myth won't let go. Across cultures, the pattern repeats. Glowing beings descending from the heavens, strangers with shining tools, gods who arrived by ship. Columbus himself wrote of balls of fire plunging into the Atlantic. Fishermen in the Pacific spoke of lights beneath the waves. Whether misinterpreted memory, metaphor, or something more, those stories refuse to die. So yes, the alien question is worth asking, but maybe the sharper question is this: what have we forgotten about ourselves? If ancient engineers could shape worlds we barely comprehend today, then perhaps the mystery is not that aliens came too soon, but that humans were extraordinary long before we admit. And if the myths are right, if something more than human once walked beside us, then that is not a reason to stop searching. It's a reason to search harder. Because whether Atlantis was contact point or memory, runway or harbor, the ocean still hides the evidence. As we trace the map, the ocean begins to sound less like a graveyard and more like a teacher. Its lessons are scattered across the world, disguised as ruins, whispered as myths. One place tricks us with geometry, blocks aligned so neatly they seem like a paved road. Another tempts us with steps plunging into the deep half-temple, half-terrace, refusing to decide. Elsewhere, poetry dismissed as legend is vindicated when sonar finds walls where myth said they should be. And high in the Andes, a sacred lake keeps both story and stone in its depths, as if daring us to separate the two. Taken alone, each site could be written off as anomaly, coincidence, exaggeration. But together, they form a pattern too insistent to ignore. Humanity builds by the shore, the sea reclaims what it will, and memory refuses to let the loss vanish. Call it Bimini, Yonaguni, Dwarka, Titicaca, or call it by its most famous name, Atlantis. The lesson is always the same. Civilizations are fragile, the ocean is patient, and myths are the thread that binds one drowned coast to another. And here is the haunting part. The ocean is not finished teaching. If every ruin so far is just the first page of the syllabus, then what chapters still lie beneath the waves? What other stories, half forgotten, still wait in the dark? Beneath the waves, sight betrays us. Even the best cameras falter in shifting light, turning terraces into tricks and blocks into shadows. The ocean bends vision until nothing feels certain. To tell its story, we need more than a lens. We need a flame. The camera is relentless. It captures angles, surfaces, outlines. A diver films Bimini and the stones align like a boulevard. Another sweeps over Yonaguni and a staircase seems to rise from the seabed. But the camera does not care if it deceives. It gives us what is there, stripped of context, hungry for interpretation. That is where the candle must burn. The candle is the scholar's flame, the myth-keeper's light, the part of us that remembers and imagines. It takes the raw footage and whispers. This could be geology, or it could be memory carved in stone. The candle does not erase the mystery, it makes it legible. Together, camera and candle create the only honest vision. Without the lens, there is no awe, only silence. Without the flame, there is no meaning, only confusion. Hold them side by side, and the ruins speak in two voices, one of rock, one of story. That duet is where truth hides. And perhaps this is how Atlantis must be told, not in glossy CGI that pretends certainty, not in cynical dismissal that scoffs at wonder, but in balance. One eye on the image, one hand steady on the flame. Because the ocean gives us fragments, and only in the play of light and shadow do fragments become narrative. But if we carry both, camera and candle, the question sharpens. What story will they reveal when we press deeper? What map will emerge from the blur? The next step is to choose between worlds, and the ocean, as always, offers more than one. Stand with me on the shoreline of everything we've seen so far. Bimini's blocks, Yonaguni's terraces, Dwarka's drowned temples, Titicaca's stones. Each site whispers a different story, but the ocean refuses to tell us which voice is true. Instead, it hands us 3 maps and dares us to choose. The first map is sober and pragmatic. It says, forget Atlantis, remember the Ice Age. Coastlines drowned, villages sank, and myths blossomed to explain the loss. Every harbor we've found beneath the waves, whether off India, Japan, or the Caribbean, belongs here. This world is the scientist's world, cautious but solid. The second map is bold, almost romantic. It imagines a mother civilization, a single cultural seed, whose branches became Egypt, Sumer, the Maya. If this map is right, the ruins we've explored are not isolated tragedies, but fragments of one vast, forgotten whole. This world is harder to prove, but its symmetry is intoxicating. The third map does not stop at Earth. It sketches shining beings, teachers from the sky or the deep, who nudged humanity forward. Here, Atlantis is less a city than a meeting point between species, a sacred crossroads of human and non-human minds. This world is the most improbable, yet it refuses to die, because myth after myth keeps its flame alive. Which map do we choose? The cautious, the bold, or the audacious? The answer matters less than the act of choosing, because each reveals what kind of story we are willing to tell about ourselves. The scholar leans toward the first, the dreamer toward the second, the believer toward the third. But the ocean keeps all 3 and withholds the key. And that is where our work begins. Not in deciding which myth we love most, but in testing which map can survive the salt and the stone. Because if Atlantis ever lived, it will not rise from legend alone. It will rise from evidence. If Atlantis is ever to be more than a story, it won't be because we wished it into being. It will be because we learned how to interrogate the sea. And the ocean, like any witness, requires the right questions. We now possess tools that Plato could never have imagined. Sonar has traced hidden terraces off Cuba. Robotic submersibles have glided down into Yonaguni's depths. Radiocarbon dating has already whispered that Dwarka's walls may be older than our textbooks allow. These aren't fantasies. They are real instruments that give us glimpses, fragments, clues. The trick is weaving them together into something undeniable. But technology alone won't save the legend. What makes this search alive is the marriage of disciplines. Geologists who read stone, oceanographers who read currents, archaeologists who read ruins, and even storytellers who remember the metaphors. Because myths, however embroidered, often carry the seed of real events, the memory of floods, of vanished lands, of shining teachers. If we ignore them, we lose half the map. Here's the paradox. Atlantis might reveal itself when we're not even looking for it. A pipeline survey could sketch a boulevard under the Caribbean. A fisherman's net might haul up a shard of pottery that rewrites history. Serendipity is the ocean's favorite trick. But serendipity only favors those who keep asking, keep scanning, keep diving. And so, how do we actually find Atlantis? By refusing to chase a single myth, and instead mapping every lost coastline with relentless care. By testing every anomaly, dating every shell, listening to every whisper of silt. Because in the end, the ocean will not hand us Atlantis as a gift, it will make us earn it. Atlantis is not just about a lost island. It is about what happens when memory sinks and we forget who we are. Every time we dive into these mysteries, we are really asking, how much of humanity has already been erased, and how much more will vanish if we stop looking? Think of it. Dwarka's walls hidden under silt, Titicaca's temples half buried in cold waters, Yonaguni's staircase lashed by storms. These are not just curiosities. They are reminders that history is fragile, and that the sea has swallowed entire chapters of our story without leaving us a chance to read them. When we chase Atlantis, we are not chasing a fantasy. We are chasing the missing pages of our own origin. This matters because the past is never just the past. The way we see it shapes the way we walk into the future. If we convince ourselves that our ancestors were simple, we may treat their wisdom lightly. If we dare to believe they left behind knowledge we barely understand, we approach the world with reverence. Either way, the choice changes us. And here's the urgency. The ocean is still erasing as much as it reveals. Storms churn wrecks deeper. Rising seas creep over new coasts. If we don't ask now, if we don't search now, some answers may slip beyond reach forever. So yes, it matters. More than clicks, more than legends. It matters because searching for Atlantis is really searching for ourselves. And the very act of searching proves that humanity still refuses to surrender to the dark. The ocean is older than every temple we've walked through, older than every myth we've told. It is the first archive, the first cathedral, the first abyss that taught us both fear and wonder. And Atlantis, whether it was a city of stone or only a city of story, has become the candle we hold against that darkness. Because the truth is this: humanity has always needed myths, not only to remember, but to aim. Myths point us where facts alone cannot. They keep us restless, pushing us to dive deeper, to measure again, to doubt, to dream. Without them, we risk becoming archivists of certainty, blind to the possibility that our story is still unfinished. So let us treat Atlantis not as a punchline, not as a bedtime tale, but as an invitation to look harder at the drowned coasts, to listen closer to the voices of ancestors, to light our instruments, our sonar, our science, like torches in a cavern. We may never find one shining island that matches Plato's tale. But if the search teaches us that the past is richer, stranger, and more fragile than we believed, then Atlantis has already done its work. Its myth has pulled us forward into questions that matter. In the end, the ocean does not owe us answers, but it does offer us choices. We can turn away, content with half a story, or we can keep the candle lit, small, flickering, fragile, against the endless dark. And sometimes, that is all it takes to find our way. We set out to ask about Atlantis, but what we uncovered was something far greater. The ocean has not only swallowed coasts and cities, it has swallowed chapters of our story. Each myth, each ruin, each unanswered question is like a fragment of a map scattered across the waves, waiting for us to piece together. Atlantis, then, is not just a city to be found. It is an unfinished map we all carry a piece of. Every dive, every sonar scan, every story told brings us closer to completing it. And that map will never be whole without curiosity, without people like you, willing to keep asking, to keep wondering. If this journey stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Share your thoughts, add your voice, and subscribe to Chronicle of Secrets. Because mysteries like these don't belong to one explorer, they belong to all of us, seekers across time, refusing to let the ocean keep the last word. So I'll leave you with this: the sea will not stop keeping its secrets. The only question is, will we keep searching together?